Welcome back to Getting Past the Premium, everybody. We are back here live in person with Ryan Brott. What's up, man?
Nothing. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. We do these now once in a while.
Yep. Whenever you need somebody to fill in, you get tapped.
The ratings just shoot through the roof, right?
I know. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I don't think so. Do we have any stats, Cam?
Not enough, right? But we thought we'd jump in today. I think this is perfect timing, actually, to have the two of us on, because we recently had a big weather event here in Omaha with the tornadoes that went through Elkhorn and some of the surrounding communities. Very devastating event for a lot of people. And obviously, these are times where our industry can shine, right? Ideally, we're the ones coming in and helping these people put their lives back together. But that brings up some of the things that we talk a lot on the show about, of how we can work with clients, how we can provide the right advice, how we can bring them the right products, everything that, you know, sets those people up for the right outcome in an event like that. But I know one of the things that you had an interesting perspective on as we were talking through this is, you know, it can be very difficult over time to, clients don't have a event like that happen very often, if ever, in their life, right? They're buying insurance every year, but may never have a claim.
Yeah.
So how do we help them and prepare them for that type of an event or any claim that can happen anytime when they're just not used to that occurring, right? Yeah. Which I think is a really good topic, because when these things happen, it obviously becomes top of mind for people, but it'll eventually go back to where they don't think about it anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, gosh, this topic's huge, right? There's so much that goes into it. But we frame this conversation up at times in terms of like how risk management advice is delivered today, right? And what we're trying to do is transition from like selling a product to providing advice.
Yeah.
And for some reason in the risk management space, it's just a hell of a long journey, right? And we've talked on the show a bunch in the past about the different reasons for that. But you're right, these events that happen bring it back to light about like, what can we be doing to better prepare our clients who, you know, this is our Super Bowl, right? This is where we need to be providing our highest tier value and advice to these clients who are trusting us to make sure that we can make them whole and take care of them in the interim. And, you know, they don't know a damn thing about risk management or insurance. They just send in their premium check and they expect that they're covered.
Covered, yeah.
And we all know that's not the case.
Not that easy, yeah.
And unfortunately, too many people find out throughout, you know, an event like this that they're not covered the way that they should be. So, you know, I guess from a high level, we give some correlations and parallels to the financial services industry, and we bring a lot of our thought process from that space to how we can implement more in the risk management space. And so, you know, the financial services industry has been forced to change through certain events like 08, 09, when the market collapsed, right? And everybody lost a ton of stuff. Or just recently when FTX went bankrupt, right? And
Tom Brady lost
in the crypto, yeah, right, and got roasted. These things happen, and they force regulation with how advice is delivered, and it just doesn't seem to happen in the risk management space ever. And we can't even get like state insurance departments to help provide clarity around how we should be giving advice, you know? So I think there's a lot more that we could glean, though, from the financial services space to just kind of continue to get in front of the curve and be able to provide better advice to our clients to prepare them when certain large events like this happen.
Well, yeah, let's dive into that, because I agree with you on that, and we don't necessarily have to wait for regulations to change to start acting in this way and start building our value props on this type of a model, right? But it can be difficult to get a client to engage and to see the importance of diving into their situation, more specifically, understanding how these insurance policies are going to work in an event like this, or really just, a fender bender, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Any sort of a claim that they're concerned about or that could impact them financially, right? So how do we, what can we do to help get those clients more engaged, to help them understand that these are very important things and that your insurance policy doesn't just cover everything? And that they ultimately, the client also has, to be clear, some onus in this process, right, of being engaged with us so we can give them the right advice, but that's another conversation. So how do we get them engaged in that discussion so that we can provide the right advice that they will implement or take to heart?
I think there's a bunch of stuff that we can do, and so we'll have to kind of walk through these and we can categorize them however we want. Like tips and tricks to help them get engaged, right?
Mm-hmm.
But and I'm also not a psychologist. Asterisk.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So, but because I think that's what we battle a lot, right? We have grown up in a society where we try very hard to look at the glass like half full. And when you look at the glass half full and you try to be optimistic in every facet of your life, it's very difficult to flip that switch off and think about all the terrible things that could happen to, us. And we have a hard time facing that reality, mm-hmm. right? It's why estate plans very rarely get executed. And if they do, they're for tax reasons, not because somebody thinks they're going to die or something's going to happen to them, and they're beneficiaries don't get updated because they don't think they're going to die, and right? So it's kind of along the same lines.
Yeah, it's the unknown. It's out there and it's not visible, right?
No. So one of the things that we've been working on is, the ability to storytell in an impactful way, right? And correlate to someone's current situation about what has happened to another client and the different possibilities and how they could impact them. Mm-hmm. And the more detailed that story and the closer we are to the details, it seems to make a bigger impact and try to help get people over the hill on okay, I still don't think it's going to happen to me, but I trust you. And
or
try
to
make some movement.
Yeah, have this conversation.
Yeah.
So I think that's all absolutely right, 100%. I also wonder, and I want your perspective, so much of our role with clients or how we engage with clients is centered around selling a product, right? Now, I know that, on the financial services side, and we use this because that side of the industry has been forced into a lot of regulation, but there are still parts of the financial services industry that sells products, right? And a lot of people still operate that same way. But how much does that, impact this conversation? Because I do feel like it's quite a bit. It's easy to sell the product that, covers most of the stuff, and clients are buying this policy, and, that's where the discussion ends sometimes.
I think it starts further back than that in terms of the model and how our industry is structured today, right? And how somebody enters into it to be able to deliver advice.
Enters into the industry?
Yeah. So if you want to get into the insurance industry and you want to build a book and create, massive amounts of reoccurring income for you and your family by the time you're 55, and be able to go live the dream life. And a lot of the people that are into our industry got into it to go make a bunch of reoccurring income, right? And have a good lifestyle. And so in order to get into it, you got to go cut your teeth. And what does that mean? It means you got to pick up the phone book. Do they make phone books anymore?
I think it's on the Google.
You got to get on the LinkedIn, and you need to start selling insurance to your friends and your family and everybody else, right? And continue to network and do all the ways to generate business that we know of, and start to gain some traction. You're under massive production requirements to get up to speed over a short period of time. And through that process, somebody's learning how to sell, learning how to manage relationships, trying to learn insurance, which is in a career in and of itself, right? And all of the things that go into operating in our space on a day-to-day business and delivering risk management. It's not easy to do, which is why we have a 80%-ish attrition rate in the first 3 years. So, I think it's flawed from the beginning, right? It's the system. And then we celebrate the other 20% that get through it, not for their ability to actually provide an experience, but their ability to sell. They get invited to $1 million roundtables, and how much production do you have, and how much revenue are you bringing in the door? And none of it is actually focused on delivering a client experience. That sets the stage for what the client is going to experience 6 years down the road when an event happens, and you're dealing with a sales guy that's selling a product and not somebody that's delivering risk management advice.
Yeah, I think that's great perspective. So what do we do about it? What's the appropriate way to bring somebody into the industry? How should we be looking at it? What's the counterpoint to that that's the correct way?
Well, I'm not in a position to say this is the way the industry should do it. I can tell you what we're trying to do, which is do it. This is going to sound really elementary, but when you're building any other business, you need to identify the seats that you need on the bus to operate that business. Right? That are all responsible for certain functions and providing that overall client experience.
Who's doing what?
Yep, from lead gen and marketing to business development to customer service and how you're going to deliver on the product to all of it. The experience, how it's going to look and feel. What does the client feel like when they walk in the room or get your package, whatever it is, right? And you have the seats on that bus that deliver your company's value prop.
Yep.
And again, if you look at our industry as a whole, in the current model, 98% of that exists with a sales guy. Mm-hmm. And I think our approach is a lot different. What we're doing is we're breaking all of that down and being very specific about who's doing what in what seat. And we're doing that across the organization, not in individual books, which I can get into that a little bit too. But,
building a business, not a book of business.
Correct.
Yeah. So we can take that further, but I want to get down into the individual producer right now, because I think we can take that upstream to the agency owner.
Just the fact that you call them producers are still
Yeah, it's true. The agency owner, the firm owner, how do they look at building their business, which is what you're kind of talking about there, right? You're looking at it from the top down and saying, how do we need to maneuver these pieces to deliver the right experience? But, talk about a producer, a risk advisor, salesperson that's listening to this that, might be in a firm that hasn't thought through that, and they're sitting in that traditional seat, right, that you described. What can that person be doing to, on their own, be working towards what we're talking about, delivering advice versus selling a product, and getting more to being that advisor versus, because they're still doing everything, just like you mentioned, But there's still a lot of things that person can be doing to make that shift to the advisor role with their client.
Yeah, there are. I'd say one of the biggest things is just have the awareness to take ownership over your current situation. I see a lot of, producers just waiting, continuing to produce and waiting for the broader organization to come tell them to make larger shifts.
Yeah.
And not being proactive in running their book of business like a business. Right?
That's great advice.
What I mean by that are like you can control the type of client that you bring on. You can control what mindset your client has and how you onboard them. And how many, what size they are, all that are going to end up dictating what your life is like and how you are able to deliver advice when you're at capacity and however you define capacity. So there are a lot of things that you can control when you kind of break it down when you're in an existing machine. But the other alternative is to find a different machine.
Yeah. That's always out there.
Yeah.
Right? Well, and I also find it interesting. It seems to me like, a lot of the producers out there, and I know this is a blanket statement that doesn't apply to everybody, but, are not investing in themselves with their own dollars, right? Meaning they're waiting for the agency or the firm or whoever, their leader, their sales manager, to tell them what class to go to, designation to get, teach them the different way to do it, versus saying like you said it about building their own business as their book, right? Which is their book. Which is a great way to look at it because it's essentially what you're doing, even if you're building it within a broader agency. And think about like what personal development, what skill set, what resources do I need to go get? Maybe you're at a point where you're hitting a bit of a ceiling and you need to hire an assistant. Like that's stuff that you don't have to wait for somebody in your firm to figure out. You can go figure that stuff out and potentially invest in yourself and say, I'm going to hire this person. Or I'm going to go out and get this coach, or I'm going to go out and take this class, right?
Because or buy this tool, or
exactly. And too often, I think it's just, producers are in that scene. I don't think it's their fault necessarily, because I think it's again how the industry does it and how it's pitched. But I'm just going to stick to what I'm told: cold calling, and go get some referrals. And I'm really not going to think about the broader value prop and model that I'm going to drive. Now, there certainly are people out there that have, but I think that's a big issue as well. And I would encourage anybody sitting in that seat to think about it that way. Think about what you need to do to build your own business, your own book of business as a business.
Yeah. And I'd like to get your thoughts on this too, but defining what your product is. Right? Defining what you're going to provide advice on and how you're going to provide advice on it is crucial, so that there are clear expectations around what the client is expecting and vice versa, what you're expecting from the client. That can be a scaling hack if that's clear.
Yeah.
And it's often not. Which it should be. You brought up, we started this conversation around the tornado damage and impact here. And, we joke about this all the time. It's not really a joke, I guess, but we laugh about it. We're like, how do you define a client being buttoned up from an insurance standpoint, right? Like, what does that mean? Are we talking about all their risks? Are we talking about all their insurable risks? What are we doing with all of those insurable risks? How do we know that they're covered? If they're not, what are we doing about them? Are we just leaving them lay? Are we providing them advice on how they could attack those in a different way? Or, are we good as a agency if we're 90% buttoned up? Like, how do we know that? you know, all of those things is still very confusing to a lot of people. And you can imagine if it's confusing to people in the industry, how it's very confusing for somebody who doesn't know a damn thing about any of it. That's where you get the whole, you know, I'm covered. And, well, you're not. Or you are to a certain extent. Yeah. So, you know, how can we clear that up? That not only provides a much better experience and an educated client, but allows a producer to scale.
Yeah, I think we've been putting a lot of thought into this from a variety of different angles, right? And you said it right there, educated client. That to me is one of the most important things, right? It's shifting your own perspective away from, I mean, just think of this connotation, right? Shifting away from selling a product, which selling a product traditionally means you're going to sell it and walk away, right? Now, I know that we have, obviously, we're going to service clients and do all the things, but like once that sale's done, wait for a claim, handle a renewal, like we're not going back through a process to deeply understand that client again most of the time. So shift that from I'm going to sell my client this product to I'm going to educate my client on what this product does and how it can help their situation, which means you have to understand their situation. And then once that client understands what they're buying or how this can impact their situation, they can make whatever decision they want. And guess what? That becomes a very easy sale. But I think it's shifting that perspective up front. We just had a prospect in today that's dealing with a big uncovered loss, and mainly because they didn't understand how things were set up, and they admitted that. Like we kind of just let it. We thought our agent had it basically under control, right? And that's one of the things we talked to them about is like, please, like the onus is on this as a partnership, right? We're here to educate you on how all this works. You're going to have to make business decisions at some point, right? You're going to have to decide what limits you want. You're going to have to decide how you want to insure things. But our goal is that you understand what those decisions are and that you can make an educated decision. But we can't also do that unless you're asking questions, unless we have a discussion about it, right? So then it becomes a two-way conversation with the client with the same goal of making sure that they're protected. Not what could be kind of looked at as an adverse situation of selling to that client, right? Like, let's get on the same side of the table. That's where I also don't necessarily like how often I hear just all of the sales tips and tricks out there, right? Like, yes, you need to know how to sell and how to have a sales-based conversation and how to understand the needs of a prospect and a client and how you can solve those needs. That's sales, right? But if you are trying to convince somebody to buy a product and they don't understand what that product, how it can actually solve their particular situation, and you're trying to use a tip or a trick to force them into buying that product, essentially, like that just doesn't sit very well with me, and I don't think we should be doing that, particularly in our industry, because it's so important, right? And so to me, it's really, we've got to shift how we look at our role, how we look at ourselves, and how do we go about that process with a prospect up front to do everything I just walked through. But take your perspective off of selling that product to how can I make sure that this client understands what they're getting in it and that it solves the problems that they need. Yeah,
I mean, 100%. So I always use the analogy of, when we're sitting in a prospect meeting, I'll say, we're not physicians. We can't draw your blood and do assessments on you, right? And feel your broken bone and like visually assess you to then come up with a diagnosis on your problems, right? Like I can't see, the doctor can draw your blood, but like us as risk advisors, we have no idea what's going on inside a business or an organization or somebody's personal life unless if we extract that information from them verbally.
Yep.
And so many times I'll hear, well, the onus is on them to tell us that they had a change in their personal life. And it's like, okay, well, that's true, but when were you going to have the conversation with them? Was that at renewal, or like, what are the expectations? Are they supposed to reach out to you when they buy a new car, or they add a new vehicle on their policy, or they buy a new piece of equipment, or they sell one and one drops off? right? And all the different stuff, or they start a new project, or they buy a bunch more inventory, whatever it is. Like, how does that communication happen in a fashion that allows an advisor to come in and constantly be doing kind of ongoing assessments when we can't just walk in and draw their blood and tell them that they have issues?
Yeah. Well, I think oftentimes that's how it is viewed, though. You know, I mean, people are required to buy certain insurance policies. And so you can look at a business, you can look at an individual and, you know, assess what policies you need to sell them or could sell them. Now, that's the salesperson side, right, of what can I sell them. What you're getting at is how do I get to know them to a deeper level so that I can make sure that even within those insurance policies, I'm educating them and helping them understand what's in there, what's in those policies, and how it's going to help their situation. It's a big difference. And, you know, again, I think, well, take a step back to what you were saying. I think it's about, again, going back to educating the client. We're guilty of this, right? You assume that the client, because they've bought insurance forever, understands how insurance actually works. And most people don't have a damn clue, right? They've never had a claim. They don't understand the inner workings, right? They hate it. They hate dealing with it. They hate paying for it. So they just go out and do what they've been trained to do, which is quote insurance or get multiple quotes and take the cheapest one, right? And so even little things when you write a new client, like you said, of when should you call me, right? Call me when you have a new vehicle change. Call me when, you know, something major changes in your life. Call me when this happens. Like, what are their expectations to be a client of yours, right? Because they do have some, right? They need to get you timely information. They need to help you understand changes in the business. But I think oftentimes we overlook that, again, because we've made the sale and we assume that that client now understands everything that they should do, right? And again, there is onus on the client, don't get me wrong, to inform us of all of that. But I think sometimes we need to do more to educate them on what that should look like. And that's, I think, how we should all look at it, is educating and helping people understand and, you know, doing our best to provide the advice that they need around those products.
Yeah, I think this gets to more of the heart of the issue too, because, you know, one of the things that we've wrestled a lot with and have had to iron out a decent plan around is the capacity issue, right? It's like, okay, well, you know, my production requirements at a big shop or any shop don't allow me to go have 4 meetings a year with my existing clients. I need to be out prospecting, bringing on new business. And so how do you expect me to go out and hold, you know, relationship-based meetings and then, you know, set another meeting with them for their renewal or 2, and then set another meeting with them to kind of check in, see if anything's changed, and da-da-da-da-da. And I certainly can't do that with any clients that are less than a certain revenue threshold. And, you know, how that model is set up dictates a lot of what we're talking about.
Yeah. I agree. And I think it's several things within that. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, is get thoughtful with the model you're building. So I think most producers just write anything they can and don't really have a thoughtful niche, a thoughtful value prop, whatever you want to say, and haven't thought through the types of clients I bring on, how am I going to provide the value that I know I need to, which is a tough question and one you need to wrestle with, right? But then there's a lot of different ways you can do it, though. You know, there's technology anymore that can do a ton of the automated educational things we're talking about, right? Like set up an automated campaign that it just goes out and says, here's what you should do in the event of a claim. When you have a vehicle change, here's what to do. When you have this, here's what to do, you know? And again, you're doing a great job educating the client, keeping it top of mind for them so they know how to react in those situations. But to your point, you cannot be everything to everyone. And the more you are reinventing the wheel, whether it be, you know, learning a new type of business, maybe you're trying to go too far upstream, so you're going from writing $2,500 accounts to $250,000 accounts. Those are very different, right? You can do that to a degree. But just those types of things, and being honest with where you're at, and then wrestling with that fact. How do I deliver this value that I need to over the course of time and for the clients that are trusting me to do that for them? And again, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but it's getting thoughtful, like your point. If you're going to do a lot of that in person, you can't have a book of 200 clients, right? So you better be writing higher revenue, accounts that you can have 50, have the book of business you need to, and be able to meet with them 4 times a year.
Right.
So it's just, I think it's determining that first. Who are you going out to serve? And then aligning your business model with the right tools, the right resources, so that you can deliver the right value, build the right relationship, understand the client appropriately, et cetera.
I agree.
I don't think that's done all that enough in our industry, that thoughtful piece.
Yeah. I think it is around maybe the really large stuff, where there's more resources, but particularly with the smaller stuff, it's all over the board.
I meant the niche side of it. They're really getting dialed in on what you're going to focus on.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, because I think, large accounts tend to obviously get the highest level resources, right? And it's a lot of the small businesses that, or personal lines that, tend to get overlooked, tend to get, automated resources, which isn't a bad thing. Like there's a business decision that's got to be made around, revenue size and how many resources you can bring to those firms. But it doesn't change the fact that you should still have this type of mentality, right, around educating, bringing value. So you may have to do it a different way. You might have to use technology. You might have to,
I think that's the
shift
key,
it to a junior producer or whatever.
Real innovation around advice and, how it's delivered, again, is just imperative when we're trying to do more with the same amount of revenue, right?
Yeah.
It's all about value compression, and so you certainly have to innovate when it comes to the smaller accounts, or they just get left behind. Yeah. And there's certainly room for the transactional space. We've talked about that a lot, where clients literally want that, and that's fine. And then there's a whole host of clients that sit between that and the clients that everyone are trying to go after, that are just kind of, lost in the wind right now. They think they're good, but they're producers trying to go upstream big time. They don't know it. They're left behind, small fish in a big pond, and all that kind of stuff. And that's where it creates issues.
Yeah. And I think too, we've been putting a lot of thought into getting this more very well laid out, but being open and transparent in the conversation with your client about what is your role, and making sure that the client understands that. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to put yourself, and you shouldn't, from a legal perspective, in the role of that the client thinks that you're going to advise them on absolutely anything that could ever happen in the business, and just they're covered, right? Yeah. Which can be the case if you're not careful, right? But that's not that's not what we're saying here, to be clear. And you want to make sure that your client understands that too, and have that discussion with them. Yeah. Be careful not to say things just to get a sale.
For sure.
Make sure that you align what you're going to do for them with what they want, and that they understand the service and the value they're going to get. And if you can do that, there's going to be some clients that, to your point, even maybe are more transactional. They're like, I don't really want that. Like, that's not, I just want somebody to sell me an insurance policy. And maybe you write it, maybe you don't. But you're going to better align with clients the more honest you are with what you're trying to do for them and what they want, right? I think it's important across many different facets, but just from getting the right clients on your bus, what you have to be clear, as we were talking about, what
what you deliver and how you deliver it and what they can expect are huge. And making sure that who you're getting advice from is working with clients that are like you. Mm-hmm. You know, I never, I use this analogy in other spaces, but when you're going to sell your house and it's a $500,000 property, like if you go work with a realtor that specializes in $2 million homes, you're not going to get the attention that you want, because you know the value props don't align, right? And the opposite side of the equation is true. If you find a realtor that specializes in a $150,000 house and you're a $500,000 house, like you're going to get all the attention, but not the expertise that you need. Yep. So it's important that those things also align and that your business accommodates that, right? When is a client too big for you, and when do they need to move on and need more resources? Are these, you know, is this client too small? Are you trying to build another model to accommodate them versus just getting crystal clear on what you are good at and where you want to operate and stick to your guns around that? And the clients really appreciate that, and it makes them feel warm and fuzzy too.
Yeah. And being okay with saying no when it fits outside of that.
Yeah.
And no as in you can still provide them a ton of value, get them to the right person that can actually take care of their needs, but know that it's not a fit for you. Mm-hmm. That's so valuable.
There's a lot of power in saying no.
Yeah.
Sometimes you say no to clients that really fit and you really want, just to make them want you even more. You know?
I thought you were a psychologist.
I'm not.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, it's such a big conversation, though. We need to continue to have it because we need to make this shift, right, between selling, or like we said, from being salesperson to more of that advisor to our clients. And it takes a lot of this thought, right, and it takes intentional work.
Yeah, and everyone trying to do a better job, right? If we're not going to have a massive event, which makes total sense, right? There isn't going to be one hurricane or one earthquake or one tornado that's going to wipe out the entire United States. It's going to force change, like there was in the 08-09 financial crisis, where 95% of the population lost some capital during that period of time, some worse than others, right? And that forced regulation because it implicated a ton of people, right? These are isolated events. The carriers are going to insulate themselves state by state, and whatnot, and everyone's just going to move on, and they're going to pay more in premium next year than they did this year. And so it's going to take every single person to want to innovate and do the right thing for the client, and not just go be, Circle of Champions award recipient.
Totally. Well, I think that's a good spot to wrap it up. We covered a lot of ground, so that was good. And I hope everybody does think about your value prop, how you're setting it up, what you're doing for clients, what's your mentality. And we can continue to make this shift, right?
We're doing it.
All right, we'll see everybody next week.
See ya.